Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Elizabeth D'Alto here, your host for the Untamed the Wild Soul podcast. And today's Ask Elizabeth, I'm going to answer the question that I skipped a couple weeks ago in our 100th episode because it was such a deep and vast question. It would have just dragged that episode out for like an extra 20 minutes. So here's the question. I always wonder about people's family and upbringing. What was it like growing up? Siblings? How were your parents? That kind of stuff. And how did you make the breakthrough from normal, in quotation marks, living to unleashing your true you? What everyday things were challenged most? What beliefs did you grow up with that you had to let go of? Hearing real examples of this kind of stuff really helps bring things down to earth for me. So in a second, I'm going to dive into that. For those of you who are listening in real time, I just want to remind you, we have an amazing early bird offer to join my new program, Wild Soul Insider, going on. And the early bird offer ends this Friday. So by the time you're listening to this, it's probably in a day or two. So it ends Friday, May 20th at midnight. And Wild Soul Insider is especially for those of you who love the podcast, who want to go deeper, who want some more specific how-tos and the nitty-gritty steps and some more intimate details of the stories behind the answers to a lot of these questions. So for example, our first couple episodes, one was about, embodying the most present aspect of your feminine energy right now. How do you do that, right? We talk a lot about masculine and feminine on the show, but how do you connect with your unique feminine? What are some ways to do that? Our second session that went up was on handling fear with grace and acceptance. And then this Friday, because new Insider sessions get posted on Fridays, is with guest mentor Michael Rostowski, who is my partner in life and my love. And we are going to talk about processing pain through and not getting stuck with it. He's one of the most courageous, incredible people I know that I've ever met that has processed through so much pain, from his upbringing and from various situations in his life. And processing pain is something we all have to do at some point or another. And so many people suffer and struggle because they're not facing their pain, because they don't want to feel their pain. So we're going to talk about how to get up in there, feel it, and get through it, get to the other side of it, not just get stuck in it. So I'm super excited for that. So if you're interested in becoming an insider, taking these deeper dives with me and some very hand-selected and specific guest mentors who are many previous guests that we've had on the show, guests yet to come. For example, upcoming in the next month or so, we have my friend Jennifer Love, Sarah Jenks, Samantha Skelly, just to name a couple, in upcoming Insider episodes. So it's really, really cool, really fun place. And the early bird deal is that you can get a year of access to this for $59. It's like ridiculous. It's less than $5 a month if you do the math. And after Friday, it's going to go up to $159 for a year, or $22 a month. So check that out at untameyourself.com/early-insider, if that sounds at all interesting to you. So, all right, let's get into this question. I always wonder about people's family and upbringing. What was it like growing up, siblings? How were your parents? That kind of stuff. So with my parents and with my family, I do have an agreement to not share super nitty-gritty personal stuff without checking in first. So here's how I'll answer that. My family, every family has their stuff. Every family has their moments of not getting along. But I'm going to share with you the things for me that were super influential in my life that really impacted me. So there was some yelling and screaming in my house. My family, I joke all the time, some people are passive aggressive. My family's aggressive. And so, expression of emotion was something I grew up with. For the most part, people didn't really stuff things, hold things in, or bury things. Like, things were out all the time. So that was cool to grow up in an expressive environment like that. It was always super safe to be myself. One of my favorite things about my mom is that it's always important to my mom that, like, home is the safest place there is. So you could be yourself, you could say anything, you could do anything. You could bring your friends here if they don't feel safe or comfortable in their own house. And so, my mom created an environment always, my dad as well, that, like, home is the safest place. As I was growing up, my parents got separated when I was in elementary school. And then they got divorced a few years later. And then many years after that, when I was a sophomore in high school, they got remarried and they remarried each other. So that was an interesting experience to go through. I have a little brother, and I always say that my little brother was the very first thing that proved to me that I am magic, because he's my very first major manifestation. When I was about 4, my younger cousin Danny was born, and they lived in Maryland. We lived in New York, and I remember going to visit Danny and being like, "Oh my God, I want one of these." And I would just pray. I prayed. I was raised Catholic. I would pray every single day for a little brother. I wanted my own little brother, and then about a year and a couple months later, I got one. So I was really convinced that in a lot of ways I made that happen when I was 4 or 5 years old. And so I have a younger brother. He's always been just like so special and so important to me. We've always been super close. I think having the age difference between us of about 5 years was great because we were never competing with each other. And I always just felt like I wanted to take care of him. Like he was my little buddy. I was so excited to have him. And even to this day, he's hilarious. He's a stand-up comedian. And when I was young, being a stand-up comedian was the first thing I ever wanted to be. So in a lot of ways, he's, fulfilling a dream of both of ours, which is kind of cool. And we just, my family, there of course are times when people don't get along, we don't agree, we could be quite different. But through tons of courageous conversations over the years, we're really at an amazing and beautiful place where we all really accept each other the way we are. And, my parents have always been super supportive of my path and what I'm doing and becoming an entrepreneur. Those of you who have ever listened to any of the episodes about money and business on the show have heard me talk about the many, many times my mom has helped me out financially over the years. And they're really just people who they're just so kind and they're so generous. My dad, I remember this funny story. My dad won a little bit of lottery one time. It wasn't a lot. It was like a couple $1,000s. And him and my mom were on a trip to San Francisco. And my mom describes it. He was literally like stuffing money in like homeless people's pockets. And my dad's not a guy who's ever like had a ton or had a bunch of like excess or surplus. But you could bet like if he has it to give, he's going to give it, which I really love. So I grew up also spending a lot of time with my grandparents. Cool story about my grandpa. Growing up, he was actually quite violent physically and emotionally in the house. And when I was born, it was like he realized he had a second chance to do things differently. And he changed quite a bit when I was born. And then when my other cousins and my brother came along. So we always say that my grandpa was super, super, super proof that people can and people do change if they feel compelled. And like you can't change other people, but they certainly can if they feel like there's an incentive change, and they absolutely will. So that's as far as growing up. I'll leave that there. So how did I make the breakthrough from normal living to unleashing your true you? And so for me, really the path creates you, the steps you choose along the path, like you kind of forge yourself choice by choice. And it's cool now to have like the eagle eye view, to zoom out and to look in on just like the major time in my life when I started taking responsibility for my choices, realizing how much choice I had started when I was 19. And I started working for a company called Cutco. I sold Cutco knives. I was an independent contractor. And it was cool because, I could work as much as I want. I could make as much money as I want. I could do as many appointments as I wanted. I was super motivated. I loved sales. It was amazing training for my future. I went through a management training program there. So really all through college, I was a marketing major in college, but I don't remember a damn thing I learned in college. But all the skills I accumulated at Cutco, running interviews, running trainings, training my own staff, finding an office, finding a receptionist, having to get office furniture, figuring out how to pay bills and be organized, training my own management staff, all these things, speaking at conferences. From the age of 19, I was speaking at local team meetings with anywhere from like 10 people to like 40 or 50 people to larger conferences and events with up to a couple hundred people. So I got public speaking training, later on when I became a personal trainer and I was running group fitness classes, it was just super easy for me because it was like a fish to water for me to stand up in front of a group of people. And so in the sales world, in the sales and marketing world that I came up in, personal growth was a big thing, but it was more oriented around positive thinking and goals and motivation and stuff like that, not necessarily emotional intelligence or spirituality. And so I had a lot of that. And then at a certain point, I did stumble across the book, The Secret, and started to realize there is a bit more magic to this world. And at the same time, in college, I really started to question my faith and my religion. And so I was in inquiry around that for many years. But even into my mid-20s, I still identified as Catholic. I went to Catholic church. But something that's really cool, and memory isn't accurate. So this is the way I look at it now. I don't know that this is actually true, but for me, just knowing that there was something bigger and just being able to have my own private conversations with God in the house of God that felt like holy and special and sacred was always something I really enjoyed about being Catholic. And I didn't necessarily identify. I've always been a person, my mom will tell you this, since I was really young, that I don't feel like rules apply to me. So I never specifically identified. I found like the religion part of religion, like the Catholicism and all that stuff that I had to learn and go through the sacraments and stuff. In some ways, I felt it. I felt the sacredness and of the ceremony and of the ritual and of the intent. But in a lot of ways, I thought the rules were stupid, and I didn't really adhere to them or follow them. And I would just break the rules and go to confession because that's what you do when you're Catholic. But I never really experienced that like deep, deep, deep guilt or anything like that. I just loved knowing that there was a God and that I could talk to God whenever I wanted to or needed to. And I could feel at peace and I could feel comforted, in a church. And then eventually when I stopped going to that, I just, realized that like the world is my church and that God is everywhere and that the divine is everywhere. And some of you have probably heard me mention on the podcast before, but books that really helped me with that were Tosha Silver's Outrageous Openness, Sonia Choquette's Ask Your Guides, and then tons and tons of books of there. Most recently, I'm reading this channeled series by a guy named Paul Selig. So I read a book called I Am the Word, and I'm currently reading the second book in the series called The Book of Love and Creation, which is really amazing. It has helped me unfold in my journey. I enjoy historical fiction, places where people tell stories, and I can take the bits and pieces of the stories that feel true to me and integrate them, into my being. So in a lot of ways, some of the beliefs, which is the next part of this question, what everyday things were challenged most? What beliefs did you grow up with that you had to let go of? There were some beliefs, and I think just generationally, a lot of people in my generation and the baby boomer, who most of our parents are baby boomers, grew up around with that. There's never enough, especially around like money and stuff like that, right? And that honoring work ethic, and you have to work for it, and it has to be hard. And the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary and stuff like that. So I really grew up indoctrinated into hard work, which is great because I learned how to work hard and I learned how to earn things. And but I didn't learn, the feminine arts, right? The things that we talk about here on the show about, receptivity, allowing other people to help you, not doing everything yourself. I grew up really seeing that you had to do everything yourself and that it was a badge of honor to not need anyone or not need any help. And that, you can work super, super hard, but there just might not ever be enough. So those were things that I had to work through and undo. And then, you pick up a lot of beliefs, not necessarily because they were instilled upon you, but because you observed it in your environment. And most recently, something I'm noticing that I picked up was that, it's not okay to get too far ahead of the people you love. Because at this point in my life is just so amazing, again, because I'm always in choice. I'm always creating. I'm working on things, I'm healing things, I'm letting things go, to just be in this space of like love and compassion and forgiveness and receptivity and loving what is, as Byron Katie talks about, and just like really allowing others to have their own experience, really taking full responsibility for my own experience. So there were tons of little choices and beliefs and challenges and things that had to be tweaked along the way of that. But one of the things I'm really coming to realize, and, this has been years in the making, since the very first time I heard that Marianne Williamson quote, where she talks about, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate, it's that we're powerful beyond measure. And she talks about, you're playing small doesn't serve anyone. When you shine your own light, you give other people permission to do the same. And that's something, 2 years ago, I for the first time launched a challenge called I Shine, You Shine. That was all about that, where I took women through this experience of shining your light, of sharing things, and in hopes of, freeing yourself from any of your own limiting beliefs, but also giving other people permission to do the same, and just seeing that like one light can't dim another. So if I'm shining very brightly, that can't possibly put another person down, right? That person can choose to be jealous. They could be envious. They can feel inadequate. They can let my light shine on all their dark spots and then see where they need to do their work, but like I can't actually put another person down. Feeling put down is a choice that people make, depending on what's going on around them. And so for me, I had to really, really come to this place of feeling really comfortable and safe with my power and with my influence, and noticing that I had worked through a lot of the fears that a lot of other people have. And in a lot of ways, as a leader, as much as I don't want to be put on a pedestal, because the core of everything we do here is that everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. And I want you to find your own power and your own authority. Some people, it's just by nature, by being a leader, people are going to put me on a pedestal. So even though I'll remind you incessantly, like, hey, don't do that, the power is inside of you, it will still happen. People still project their power on me. It's really interesting. I'll meet people and they feel intimidated by me and stuff like that. And of course, I don't want people to feel that way. But the thing that I really had to come to is like, that's their own choice and that's their own stuff. I've certainly done that with other leaders and people I've met, and like just made people better than me or thought that I'm better than other people. So working through all that stuff, that level stuff, right? That people are better or that I'm better. Judgment is a big thing. Like we all have that, right? The various fears about being too much, or I can't have that much. Like when other people in the world are struggling and suffering, well, like, of course I can, because I give back, because I'm a borderline obsessed with being useful and like just using every last drop of like talent and energy and everything in my body that I could possibly use. I want to recycle it out and give it back and help other people do the same. So there's a lot baked into that. And in relationship, I'll tell you what, most of us, and I fall into this category as well, didn't grow up with models of like great relationships or relationships that we would actually, want to mirror or model or have. And so even in my own relationships over the years, I look back on men that I've dated and I see ways that I've sabotaged those relationships because I didn't believe it was possible to have it that good. I've also, of course, attracted partners to just like bring up the stuff that I needed to heal and deal with at the moment. But more recently in my relationship with Michael, one of the things I realized is these really, really sneaky, subtle ways that I had really tried to push him away. And really tried to create some chaos so I could leave. So I didn't have to go deeper and deeper and deeper into like love and commitment and partnership. I realized that I didn't actually believe in that. I didn't believe that was possible. And it's like, not only is it possible, but it's like so possible. And I've chosen like the perfect man to show me like it's possible. Like I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to hold space for all the parts of you. And giving me the opportunity to hold space for all the parts of him, and just like really true, deep, like full, unconditional love and acceptance. So that's been a big belief and journey into believing in love like that and allowing myself to be open to it and not shutting it off and not sabotaging it. And those of you who listen to the podcast regularly have heard me mention The Queen's Code by Alison Armstrong. You guys know that I've interviewed her, and that's coming up in the queue, which is really exciting. But, also just realizing, and this was a very recent belief, a very recent lesson, how often I was emasculating men. And even emasculating and objectifying not just men, but men and women and other people in general. And just always, always, always looking at like, what does that say about me? How am I like that? What's going on? So it's been gut-wrenching and heartbreaking, but also gut-fortifying and heart-opening to live a life where I'm not willing to blame anyone else for anything that I've got going on. And that includes my success, being able to take full credit for like how amazing my life is, the success of my business, the ease, how great things are going now. And I still have gaps. There's still things I work on, but I work on them with so much love and compassion. Like when I'm at the gym, I'm not being like, oh, like you fat B word, like you gained all this weight. It's like, oh man, I love you so much. Like we got this, we're getting through this. Take your time, you'll get there. It's just cool to notice like the self-talk, the way I talk to myself, view myself, and treat myself now. So yeah, those are some of the things. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this for hours because there's so many little nitty-gritty nuances and things like that. But I hope any of those things have maybe highlighted some things that you might want to work on in yourself, or maybe a different approach you can take, or areas where you might want to love yourself more, or areas where maybe you've like thrown a wrench in it because you didn't believe it was possible and it totally is, and now you're available for that. So thank you so much for the person who asked this question. And a reminder again, if you're listening in real time, check out Wild Soul Insider if you want that early bird deal before Friday, May 20th. That's untameyourself.com/early-insider. And if you have a question that you ever want to submit for one of these Ask Elizabeth episodes, you can always email hello@wildsoulmovement.com. If you are not yet a member of our free but private Facebook group, you can join that at untameyourself.com/Facebook. That's where we have women all over the world connecting. So you can, maybe make some new friends in your area. Just this past week, we had a couple women getting together in the UK. They all connected with each other in that Facebook group. So that's a super cool thing to find and connect with your tribe, whether it's virtually or possibly in real life by joining the Facebook group. And that's it. Thank you so much. We will see you next week.
I think that we equate grief with someone dying and someone close to us,
right?
But it's really not. And it was interesting for me. It's like when I went through my divorce, I felt like I was only allowed to grieve, the breakup of he and I and the loss of that relationship and the dream that I had there. But I never grieved losing his entire family.
Right.
And it's like the things like that, like all of those friends and family and those experiences and I also thought there was a time limit on it. Like I had to put a container on it. Like once I got married and had this new life, which I'm happily married and I have these 2 beautiful children, like, nope, can't anymore. Like that,
right,
no more
grief. It's almost presented as like that would be like a betrayal to the new
relationship,
right?
I was making it mean that I was dishonoring and disrespecting my current relationship.
Right.
Which wasn't true.